Hello there, and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Meyers. We're here every week, meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues.
Well, today I want to start out by thanking Joel Wolgemuth for recommending Reverend Turner to us, Robert Turner, from Tulsa. I was unaware of him, I'm sorry to say, but Joel told me all about him, and we were lucky enough to get him on the show in a kind of a transitional stage.
Well, it'd be good to hear from him today. Robert Turner, today's guest in The Verdict. We'll be right back.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
Military service ran in my blood, starting from my father, which joined the Navy. On the Chickasaw side, my uncle, which served in the United States Army. I'm Benjamin Espinosa, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, and I'm Chickasaw. I went to the Secretary of Defense's staff at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., which ultimately led to becoming a combat support technician for Naval Special Warfare, specifically SEAL Team 10. I think to be proud and to love your tribe, to love being Chickasaw, you also have to love being American. You also have to love everything that America stands for: equality, perseverance, professionalism, and power. I want my family to know that their father is a good person, but also feels that he has an obligation to the country and to love this nation. Anything worth having is worth dying for. The military and the country owes me nothing. I owe it everything.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Meyers. Ken's going to introduce today's guest.
Well, as I indicated in the open, we are very pleased to have today joining us Reverend Dr. Robert A. Turner, the pastor at Vernon, A.M.E. Church in Tulsa. Reverend Turner did his undergraduate work at the University of Alabama, where he was named Most Outstanding Male Student, and some other honors along with that. He did his master's degree in divinity at Interdenominational Theological Seminary in Atlanta. He did his master's of divinity at the United Theological Seminar in Dayton, Ohio. He has been probably on television more than Mick and I have, although Mick may give him a close run for his money. He's been all the national news shows and shows that talk about current issues. He has numerous national honors. In August of 2017, he joined the Vernon Chapel A.M.E. Church in Tulsa and has been there since then. He has been responsible for a lot of initiatives that are forward-looking and very progressive in making life better for the humankind. And we're just so gracious that you'd join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're pleased to have you.
Good
Dr.
to be here.
Turner, you've done some great work in Oklahoma. Looking back, what are you going to be most proud of?
Really, as a pastor, always thankful to God anytime you can help save a soul. When people come to you, giving their life to Jesus Christ, that's, to me, the epitome and the highest moment any pastor could have. Baptisms, weddings, eulogies, families trusting you to eulogize their loved one, and couples trusting you to marry them, and people trusting you to baptize them and their children. That's first and foremost what I'm most proud of. And then community work that we've been blessed to do, our food ministry that we started, March 18, 2020, we started feeding people, just inspired by God, right? We didn't have it in our budget, but we saw the need. And today we serve now over 430,000 meals. And that may not sound like a lot to some people, but to a church that has less than 150 members, to have and 85% of them are over the age of 65, for us to have served over 430,000 meals is like a miracle.
Tulsa's going through remembering the massacre and trying to write itself in history, and you were central to that discussion. Talked about what that was like.
That was really a cause of my life. Outside of the church, outside of my pastoral role for Vernon, that was more like a pastoral role for the community and the city, to try to help bring healing to the city that has been traumatized and really has never reckoned with her ugly past, right? And so part of my community pastoral role was to speak to that, to denounce that sin, that sin that allowed the massacre to take place, greed, racism, and whatnot, to denounce it and to call the city to recognize it. You can't repent. You can't stop committing a sin you don't recognize. So first recognizing it, we call it in the church confessing, and then repenting, right? Turning from that, and then to make some repair for that which you have caused, the damage you've caused.
In the course of those events commemorating the massacre, you had 2 or 3 of the folks that were actually present at the massacre in their hundreds participate. How inspiring was that?
Well, they were involved in we had several festivities, and they were involved in a festivity or a parade, so to speak, during the commemoration weekend, and for the community to come out, not just Tulsa community, but people all across the country to come to Tulsa, and those who could not come to visually watch on TV or social media. That was so heartwarming, and I've had the chance to give communion to one of these survivors, and Mrs. Leslie Randall, and she was a former member of one of our sister churches in Tulsa, St. Paul A.M.E. Church, and to just be able to be in their presence is really awe-inspiring.
How is Tulsa coping with this, kind of the near recent past of remembering that event? And are you confident that we're on a better place going forward?
Tulsa has responded. The city, the community, I should say, that's really been some tension in the response. The city has done several things. I was a part of, and still am a part of, the mass grave excavation, right? But because this is something that's been hidden for so long, you're going to uncover things that are uncomfortable for people to talk about. And so for every, what some may call progression or advancement, there's also an exposure of a wound, right? And that hurts. And so you have some tension there, a lot of tension there. I think that what the future for Tulsa, and right now the present of Tulsa, we shouldn't let the tension stop us from healing, right? It's kind of like, once you go to the gym and work out, you're gonna break down some muscle. That's gonna be painful the next morning. But the pain shouldn't stop you from going back out to the gym to work out. And so that's what I'm hoping. That's my prayer, that as we continue to use those muscles that we haven't used in like 100 years, we're finding out things we haven't known for 100 years. As we use those muscles, as the tension comes, to not allow that to keep us from going back to the gym, to do more, to learn more, to lift more, to carry more, and to help lift each other up.
Do you believe that the educational system in Oklahoma will pay more attention to events like that race massacre, or events that have racial overtones attached to them?
I am a firm believer in the old adage that those who do not remember their past are doomed to repeat it. Yeah. And so unless Oklahoma is wanting to leave that door open to reliving that past, then we must teach it to future generations. I think that one of the things that makes it so hard now for us to talk about is because we haven't talked about it in so long. I'm from Alabama. Everybody knows our history with slavery, with Jim Crow, with you name it, right? But it's not as hard to talk about in Alabama and do something about it because it's ubiquitous. We all know about it, right? In Oklahoma, especially in Tulsa, because the massacre was not known for so long, it makes it that much harder to talk about and even more harder to do some repair from. So if Oklahoma, and I know she does, cares about her children and cares about her future, I think if we really care about them, we want to have the conversations now with this generation so that future generations won't have to go through those same type of uncomfortable and traumatic changes in their life.
You really stepped up and became kind of a leader / spokesperson in Tulsa. What in your past prepared you for that moment? Because that's a pretty big stage.
I would say my time in Alabama as a student at the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, by the way. I had to say that. Welcome to the SEC.
I had to get that out.
That's right.
Forgive us if we edit that out, but go ahead.
No problem. But I've been a student at Alabama, learning about different things. For an example, while I was a student, there are several things happened, right? Somebody wrote, "I hate N" on the door of the NAACP office. A law school professor found that the university owned slaves, and the slaves that died were buried on campus, right? And so I and 2 other students formed a movement to get those slaves recognized. Jack and Boys, you can look it up. And CNN came then. At the time, it was the Aaron Brown show, and our faculty senate issued an apology for the university's role in slavery. It was so normal. You know how today professors get a salary and dental and health and full health insurance. Back then, they got their salary and a slave. Slaves were fringe benefits.
Oh my goodness.
In this country at public universities, right? And so when they died, because they were the property of the university, they were just buried on campus in unmarked graves. And so doing that type of work at an early age, I was 19, 20, 21 years of age, leading those type of movements, having those interviews with CNN back then. The New Republic was an article, my first national magazine interview. I was 19 years old. And so that kind of prepared me for what I'm doing now.
Let's get to a break. Robert Turner is our guest. We'll be right back. You're watching The Verdict.
When I came to work for the ODVA, I started realizing the opportunity to take care of veterans. It's a powerful thing when you realize that you are taking care of people that made history.
Working here is a calling. It's really, really important that they don't just come here to exist. We want to give them meaning to their lives. We try to make life happy and meaningful and fulfilled for our veterans.
One of the best kept secrets about the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit is that it can be used at a trade school or a technical school, and it doesn't have to be used at a university or college. These are benefits that the veterans have earned through their service, and they should take advantage of it.
Veterans really need to understand that there are many resources offered by the Oklahoma Department of Veteran Affairs. They're there to help you find the right school for you, the school that will help you and your family make great steps into your future.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, Our competition teams rank number 2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick, Cornett, Meyers, and our guest, the Reverend Robert Turner. And you're a man on the move right now. You're transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
I have recently been given an opportunity to go and serve and pastor elsewhere. And it is in the Baltimore area. It's actually called Empowerment Temple. And just really excited about this next chapter in my life.
Well, anytime you're excited to leave, you leave relationships behind. And I know you've made quite a mark in Tulsa.
I have, and that's the hardest part. This was not my first opportunity to leave Tulsa. I've turned down a few, but this is the one that God spoke to me in. I'll just be very brief on it. I had one night, it was a Thursday night, I had a dream that I was preaching in this huge auditorium sanctuary. And I remember being there before, but I was like, this is definitely a dream because nowhere in a million years would I ever be preaching in this sanctuary. The next morning, I get a call from the leaders of that same church.
Oh my gosh.
Like Thursday night, I'm having a dream about preaching in this place. And I'm like, this is a fun dream. I'm preaching. And the next morning, I get a call from the leader of that church offering me a chance to come and pastor. And so I was like, I know I've turned down several before, but I felt like that was definitely from God.
So that's something that at some point, either perhaps before this show airs or after, will come about.
Yes, I will start my first Sunday on this coming Sunday.
Okay. Well, talk about before we lose you. Talk about your Vernon Church and what have you enjoyed your experience there, and what have you learned?
Pastoring Vernon has been a joy of my life. Next to being married and having children, being the pastor of historic Vernon A.M.E. Church. When I first came there, she was not historic. She was not on the registry for historic places. That happened after I got there. The restoration work that we began with the stained glass windows, $1 million praise value stained glass windows, restrooms being restored, prayer wall for racial healing, which is the only one of its kind in the world. And outside of Jerusalem is the only public prayer wall, period, in the world. And having the people of our nation's leaders come to Vernon. We've been visited by Senator Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke, Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and so many others. Majority Whip James Clyburn, U.S. Senator Chris Coons, of course, our Senator Langford has been there. Congress Lady Rochester and Barbara Lee out of California. Not to mention the national and international media, the BBC, CNN, MSNBC, 60 Minutes, and just so many others, national publications, New York Times, Washington Post. Having a church that when I got there, I had to tell people, in fact, folks didn't even know where she was, right? I had to describe Vernon as the church next to something else, and now people all across the world, knows who she is, and they know about our plight. They know about our story. A phrase that I kind of coined to describe Vernon as being the grandmother of Greenwood. We're the oldest continuous landowner in the whole Greenwood district, and just to see her name resonate in places that she has never been. Just warms my heart. And the food ministry that we do has really just taken a life of its own. We focus a lot under my administration on our unhoused neighbors. We used to house the homeless inside the church. In fact, the very basement that survived the race massacre, we used to house the homeless in there. That was a major fight, by the way. That was my first big acts of the congregation, you know, to, hey, let's let the homeless come and sleep here, and, you know, and especially in the winter when it was freezing cold outside. But after COVID came, we transitioned from having them sleep in our church basement to we help them get hotel accommodations now. So those things I will always, you know, remember and treasure.
I want to switch subjects slightly and talk about technology and how it's helping the church with its messaging. What do you see in that area?
I think that's the next wave of the church, really, and it is a blessing. I know sometimes churches shy away from technology or anything that is different, but technology really has opened up the ministry to places that we physically would never go. Like the physical building of the church can never go to Hawaii, right? You know, the physical building of the church can never go to Amsterdam. You know, you can't get up and walk. But people from Amsterdam, people from Hawaii can tune in and feel virtually in the service. And that's one of the great transformational things that technology has done. Now you understand while people are watching you on their laptop or phone, they also are getting text messages, they're getting emails, they're getting, you know, work assignments. So you have to compete, you know, with so many other things that folks have on those devices. So you don't know how much they're paying attention. But that's one of the other good things about virtual is, and being online, people can always go back and replay it. So if they miss something because they were checking out an email, they can go back and listen to it again.
And they can go back and listen to this show again.
That's right. That's right. Please listen to this show again. That's right.
Well, what challenges do you think, in retrospect, that Tulsa is facing, and how do you think they're meeting those challenges?
I think Tulsa is really at a crossroads right now. Either she will, now that the centennial is over, either she will just kind of run from that history and just go on to the next thing, or will she really stay in that moment and make it a movement and really make it a transformative time for the city's history. I think that Tulsa, like Oklahoma, is a beautiful place. Anybody would love to live here in this city, in Tulsa and in the state of Oklahoma. Some of the most fantastic people I've ever met reside in Oklahoma. It really was so nice how people were accommodating and welcoming to this son of Alabama in Oklahoma. And I think that the future is bright for Oklahoma and Tulsa, but it will require her to continue to hold that beacon of light. You know, the future is only as bright as long as you're willing to hold and be the light. And I hope that Tulsa, who had a spotlight shine on her for like the past few months, you know, I hope that she doesn't relinquish that light to go on to something else that she thinks is more prosperous or easier to talk about.
We got less than a minute to go. Tell us about your family. We hadn't had a chance to really discuss that part of your life.
Now, I said Pastor and Vernon was a joy of my life. My family is the joy of my life. My wife, Cherie, a Mississippi native, and my two boys. Oh, man, they have just really, God has a great sense of humor. Give me everything I ever could give my parents back to me and my sons. So I love them. I can't wait to get home every day. Before I start this interview, I was talking to my wife. When I finish with this interview, I'm gonna go call my wife. It's just they keep me straight. They keep me humble. They keep me motivated and encouraged.
I wish them the best of luck in Maryland.
Thank you. Thank you.
Reverend Turner, thanks for your work.
Pleasure.
And thanks for joining us. I know you had to drive down here from Tulsa, and we appreciate it.
I broke a few speed limit signs and laws, but nobody caught me, so thank God.
And Kent and I'll have a final word when we return.
It used to be okay in hospitals. It used to be okay in movie theaters. It was okay in classrooms, restaurants, and airplanes. But thanks to a greater understanding of the dangers, that's not okay anymore. So now that we know secondhand smoke causes lifelong health problems, why is it still okay to smoke with children in the car? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's get serious about protecting kids. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children coming from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids got to know they can trust you. And that's what we try to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers, wrapping up the show with Reverend Robert Turner.
Well, really good to meet him, and appreciate him coming and joining us for this show, and really inspiring fellow.
Yeah, he really is. A couple of websites to draw your attention to. First, you can learn more about Reverend Turner's church at VernonAME.com. That's VernonAME.com. And we have a website. Love for you to log on and tell us about a guest you'd like to see on our show, or maybe a topic you'd like to see us discuss. Our website is theverdict.tv. That's going to do it for this week. Glad you joined us. For Kent, I'm Mick, and we'll see you next week.